So I am an avid reader. I've been reading a lot of things, a lot of books for a long time, and I wanted to share with you guys some of the excerpts from some of my favorite books. And the one I wanted to start with today is called Letting Go: The Pathway of Surrender by David Hawkins. And this is one, I'm only about halfway through it, but it is already one of my favorites. And I'm just going to read the description on the back. I don't exactly know how to describe this book. It's like a self-help book, but it's really just a way of helping people to come to terms with themselves, the reality as it unfolds, their mortality, their feelings, their thoughts, etc. So the back of the book describes it this way. Letting go describes a simple and effective means by which to let go of the obstacles to enlightenment and to become free of negativity. During the many decades of the author's clinical psychiatric practice, the primary aim was to seek the most effective ways to relieve human suffering in all of its many forms. The inner mechanism of surrender was found to be of great practical benefit and is described in this book. Dr. Hawkins' previous books focused on advanced states of awareness and enlightenment. Over the years, thousands of students had asked for a practical technique by which to remove the inner blocks to happiness, love, joy, success, health, and ultimately, enlightenment. This book provides a mechanism for letting go of those blocks. The mechanism of surrender that Dr. Hawkins describes can be done in the midst of everyday life. The book is equally useful for all dimensions of human life: physical health, creativity, financial success, emotional healing, vocational fulfillment, relationships, sexuality, and spiritual growth. It is an invaluable resource for all professionals who work in the areas of mental health, psychology, medicine, self-help, addiction recovery, and spiritual development. So kind of a hard book to describe, but if I had to sum it up, it's like just teaching you to let go of blockages in your mind or in your heart. The narrative or the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, a way to just let go of these things and let the actual radiant beings that we are shine through. So with that, I want to jump in and just read some excerpts, and then I'll provide a little commentary afterwards. So I'm going to start with an excerpt from chapter 2. The author writes, quote, "If we take a close look at human life, we see that it is essentially one long, elaborate struggle to escape our inner fears and expectations that have been projected upon the world. Interspersed are periods of celebration when we have momentarily escaped the inner fears, but the fears are still there waiting for us. We have become afraid of our inner feelings because they hold such a massive amount of negativity that we fear we would be overwhelmed by it if we were to take a deeper look. We have a fear of these feelings because we have no conscious mechanism by which to handle the feelings if we let them come up within ourselves. Because we are afraid to face them, they continue to accumulate, and finally we secretly begin looking forward to death to bring all of the pain to an end. It is not thoughts or facts that are painful, but the feelings that accompany them. Thoughts in and of themselves are painless, but not the feelings that underlie them. It is the accumulated pressure of feelings that causes thoughts. One feeling, for instance, can create literally thousands of thoughts over a period of time. Think, for instance, of one painful memory from early life, one terrible regret that has been hidden. Look at all the years and years of thoughts associated with that single event. If we could surrender the underlying painful feeling, all of those thoughts would disappear instantly and we would forget the event." Unquote. So, as I think probably many men have experienced in their lives, I've been one of those guys that suppressed a lot of emotion probably as a survival mechanism from early childhood trauma. And even to the point, I think in my early 20s, I would think that, feelings don't matter. I recall conversations with ex-girlfriends that would just beg me to open up or show some emotion. And you might as well have been talking Chinese to me. I didn't know, I couldn't relate whatsoever. And so to go from that perspective where like feelings do not matter, it's all logic, it's all laws of physics, it's all math, whatever the hyper rational masculine mind wants to tell you, to this opposite perspective that the author is sharing, that feelings are primary, right? It's your primary sensation of reality, of experience itself. Like it comes in the form of feeling, obviously, right? If you're not feeling well, for instance, if you're sick, well, you're probably not going to work that day. Or you're probably not going to do things that you had planned, right? It's not that your thoughts made you not go to work. It's that you're actually feeling unwell. And oftentimes when we're feeling unwell, to the author's point, we start to have complexes of negative thoughts. And so just seeing it differently, it's almost like the saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. He's saying something like a feeling is worth 1,000 thoughts. And so when we over-identify with our thoughts, and I think this is especially true of the masculine, and we become detached from our feelings, we lose touch with our intuition, our instincts, our wisdom, ultimately. And that can be extremely costly, right? That can harm us. That can cause us to not show up well in whatever role we're playing, whether that's, a leader, an employee, a father, a sister, a brother, whatever it is you're doing. And so I found this book, again, I'm only halfway through, but like it's been really useful in helping me see that perspective, right? That to be in touch with your feelings does not make you less masculine or make you feminine. It's actually just being in closer touch with what is real. And of course there's a balance, right? It doesn't mean you should just constantly trust your feelings and always do everything based on your feelings. You have to have that balance with logic and thought and whatnot. But I think the primacy is with the feeling rather than the thought. And I found that to be very interesting. I'm going to read another excerpt from chapter 2 of Letting Go. The author writes, quote, "Of these mechanisms used by the mind to keep the feeling repressed, denial and projection are perhaps the best known methods, as they tend to go together and reinforce each other. Denial results in major emotional and maturational blocks. It is usually accompanied by the mechanism of projection. Because of guilt and fear, we repress the impulse or feeling, and we deny its presence within us. Instead of feeling it, we project it onto the world and those around us. We experience the feeling as if it belonged to them. They then become the enemy, and the mind searches for and finds justification to reinforce the projection. Blame is placed on people, places, institutions, food, climatic conditions, astrological events, social conditions, fate, God, luck, the devil, foreigners, ethnic groups, political rivals, and other things outside of ourselves. Projection is the main mechanism in use by the world today. It accounts for all wars, strife, and civil disorder. Hating the enemy is even encouraged in order to become a quote-unquote good citizen. We maintain our own self-esteem at the expense of others, and eventually this results in social breakdown. The mechanism of projection underlies all attack, violence, aggression, and every form of social destruction." This reminded me of a quote from someone that said something to the effect that the purpose of propaganda is to convince one group of people that another group of people are not, in fact, people, so that you can basically label them, scapegoat them, and ultimately justify dehumanizing them in some way, right? whether that's taking away their liberties or even taking away their lives oftentimes. And so there's this whole, that sounds like it's some kind of external political process, but it's just a reflection of what's going on inside of us, right? We're doing this all the time. We have a negative experience and we start to make a narrative that, often puts us in the position of the wronged or the victim, and that the external circumstances or other people were somehow the cause of your affliction. And so this repression, the mind is constantly trying to either repress the feeling or then project it onto others. And so there's an unconscious process that's incredibly dangerous, right? It's something that again takes us out of touch with reality, right? The mind is overriding the feeling rather than just letting the feeling, letting go ultimately of the feeling, right? Like that's, I think, the main point of this book. This is the title of this book, Letting Go, is like to acknowledge that a feeling has occurred and you've put or built a story around it, and then to just let it go. Rather than just living in the story and being, oftentimes people even get stuck in these stories. They get stuck in unconscious patterns of action. These things can go on for generations, right? Children will imitate their parents unconsciously, and so on and so on. So this takes me directly back to, I guess this is my favorite quote from Carl Jung at this point, that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct your life and you will call it fate. And so the mind is an incredibly useful servant, but a terrible master, right? The master organ is our actual sense experience, right? The heart, the connection with reality around us. And then the mind is trying to interpret that through a logical filter, to decomplexify it, to analyze the past, to plan for the future. Like, again, all really useful things. But the utility of the mind comes at a price. And I think that this unconscious process the author's describing of repression and projection, I would almost guarantee that everyone has suffered from this at some point, right? I don't see how you couldn't have done it at some point. It's almost like a side effect of using natural language. And so, I don't know, for me, my takeaway was just that to try and become more conscious of this unconscious dynamic, right? That we can, we do narrativize our experiences as a means of dealing with them, as a means of communicating them, as a means of recording them. But the narrative does not match the reality, right? Every individual with their own perspective is going to have their own version. And we need to be conscious of that, basically, to be effective, good, loving people in the world. I'm going to read another excerpt from chapter 2. Author writes, quote, "If we dump our negative feelings on others, they experience it as an attack, and they, in turn, are forced to suppress, express, or escape the feelings. Therefore, the expression of negativity results in the deterioration and destruction of relationships. A far better alternative is to take responsibility for our own feelings and neutralize them. Then only positive feelings remain to be expressed." Unquote. So, yeah, what is this saying? It's like, of course, you're going to experience negative feelings, specifically in interpersonal relationships. The mirror of relationship is almost the only way, or at least the primary way, that these negative feelings come up, right? Aside from, maybe physical pain or health issues. It's often when we're interacting with other people that we have misalignment or miscommunication and some experience of the other being not what we wanted them to be for whatever reason, right? Which you could broadly label as a negative feeling. The realization here, though, is that is ours. Like, we own that negative feeling, right? It's not proper exactly to put that on someone else and say that you often hear people say, you made me feel this way. And that's just not simply true, right? You can't actually make someone feel a certain way. We are ultimately individually responsible for our feelings. And we have to be constantly aware of that, constantly vigilant, and then also very careful not to take those negative feelings up into the mental process and create a narrative out of them, right? Where you start to, again, dehumanize the other or say, oh, you did this, you did that, you're a bad person, or you're a dishonest person, or you're whatever the negative label is. And so, yeah, that's kind of the gist of the book. The author's saying, like, be responsible for your own negative feelings and learn to just feel them, process them, assimilate them for what they are, right? It's just a feeling, right? It's not necessarily a reality. It's a feeling, ultimately. It's one limited perspective on reality. And then learn to let it go, right? Just let it, I was going to say enjoy the feeling. That's not quite right. A lot of these feelings are unenjoyable, but let the feeling be felt and then release it, right? And it's through this iterative process of repeatedly surrendering the negative feeling and just letting it go that you are left with nothing but just your radiant, living, energetic self, right? The positive feeling of actually being alive and breathing and having perception and existing in the world and being meaningful to other people. So it's an incredibly simple idea, but something about the simplicity of it is what makes it so incredibly difficult. And so I think it's almost like meditation, right? It's something you can do anywhere, anytime. You can always reflect on yourself and take stock of your feelings, whether they be positive or negative, and try and just feel the negative feelings for what they are, and then let them go before they mutate into some narrative format and you start telling yourself a story about others or about yourself that is in some way limiting or otherwise not serving your higher self. So I'm going to read another excerpt from chapter 2 of Letting Go. Quote, "The rationalizing mind prefers to keep the true causes of emotion out of awareness and utilizes the mechanism of projection to do this. It blames events or other people for causing a feeling and views itself as the helpless, innocent victim of external causes. They made me angry. He got me upset. It scared me. World events are the cause of my anxiety. Actually, it's the exact opposite. The suppressed and repressed feelings seek an outlet and utilize the events as triggers and excuses to vent themselves. We are like pressure cookers ready to release steam when the opportunity arises. Our triggers are set and ready to go off. In psychiatry, this mechanism is called displacement. It is because we are angry that events, quote unquote, make us angry. If through constant surrendering we have let go of the pent-up store of anger, it is very difficult and, in fact, even impossible for anyone or any situation to, quote unquote, make us angry. There's this quote, I'll paraphrase it. I think Buddha said it something like, "I am not what you think I am. You are what you think I am." And so again, back to this idea of projection, that this is the reality of being human and being mortal and living in a universe characterized by entropy and randomness, right? We deal with uncertainty, and that is a painful process, right? There's no one that is alive today that has not endured some form of hardship. It's simply not possible. And that energy doesn't just pass through us, right? It's actually stored in us. It's stored in our bodies, right? There's a book titled The Body Keeps Score. It talks a lot about this. And that, again, as to get to the author's earlier point, the feelings are the source of the thoughts, right? Not the other way around. So there's all of this energy stored in our body, right? We have this like organic membrane that we are storing all of this information. And then the mind is actually seeking out these trigger events in the world to then release that pent up energy and project it, right? To blame someone or something for the feeling of the pent up energy that arises from our own trauma. I mean, if you just think about that, it is such a liberating thing. It is, you don't need to be stuck in the story. You don't need to be stuck in the pain anymore, right? This is not something you do once. This is not just, an instant enlightenment. There are no shortcuts here, right? It's an ongoing process that you must do throughout your life. You must continually take that step back outside of yourself, identify the feelings that are negative and not serving you, and then find a way to surrender them. And it's more about, you're not so much adding anything as you are just removing things, right? And as you remove these blockages, you get to experience just the radiant reality of being alive, right? Just the raw gratitude of actually being a breathing, living organism in this world. And so again, it's utterly simple, but as simple as it is as difficult as it is, because it is a continuous process of work that never ends, right? It's like the art of living that's being described here. And so take ownership, take radical ownership for yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, identify where you have maybe converted some of your negative feelings into negative thoughts or negative stories or even a negative identity, right? And reflect upon these things for what they are, and then consciously let them go. That is the key that this author is offering us. I'm going to read another excerpt from Letting Go, chapter 2. Quote, "When the pressure of suppressed and repressed feelings exceeds the individual's tolerance level, the mind will create an event out there upon which to vent and displace itself. Thus, the person with a lot of repressed grief will unconsciously create sad events in life. The fearful person precipitates frightening experiences. The angry person becomes surrounded by infuriating circumstances. And the prideful person is constantly being insulted. As Jesus Christ said, 'Why do you see the splinter which is in your brother's eye and do not feel the beam which is in your own eye?' All the great masters point us within." So it's like simple physics in a way, right? It's just pressure differentials. If we're not conscious of this, that we have this accumulation of energetic pressure within us, right? This negative feeling. And if we're not conscious of how this process works, then we'll just unconsciously identify something external to ourselves as a target to assign or to channel all of that energy towards, basically. And again, that's the unconscious way of doing it, or what the author is offering us, in my understanding, is the more human and more conscious way of doing it, which is identifying the negative feeling for what it is, right? Negative, it's a negative feeling. It's a stored energetic imprint of an experience you had that was unpleasant in one way or another. And so rather than unconsciously projecting these things at other people, we can choose to take responsibility for our own feelings and to feel them, then to let them go and to surrender them And through this process, we become better, healthier, more successful. Someone told me once that parenting is one long process of letting go. And that one hit hard. And there's a lot of truth to it. Once you start raising a little human and you see them coming online and going through all of their developmental phases, but you also realize, you're helping this person become a fully fledged person, right? Like they're not fully online, right? You don't get mad when your toddler breaks something. Well, you might. If you do, you probably need to read this book. I mean, it's just a natural part of 3-year-old being a 3-year-old when they break something or, make a mess or whatever the thing is. But again, that is natural in the deepest sense of the word, and that it is always going to be the case. I don't think there's a future imaginable where 3-year-olds are, fully mature and not breaking stuff and or making messes. So you need to accept it. Come to terms with what is real. Come to terms with the nature of being human and let it go, right? You don't need to hold on to it. You don't need to store it up in your body. You don't need to dwell on it. You don't need to narrativize it. You just need to accept it for what it is, feel it, which is the purpose of a feeling, right? To be felt, and then let it go. I'm going to read another excerpt from chapter 2, and this section is titled "The Mechanism of Letting Go." The author writes, quote, "Letting go involves being aware of a feeling, letting it come up, staying with it, and letting it run its course without wanting to make it different or do anything about it. It means simply to let the feeling be there and to focus on letting out the energy behind it. The first step is to allow yourself to have the feeling without resisting it, venting it, fearing it, condemning it, or moralizing about it. It means to drop judgment and to see that it is just a feeling. The technique to be with the feeling and surrender all efforts to modify it in any way." Sorry, I'm going to read that line again. The technique is to be with the feeling and surrender all efforts to modify it in any way. Let go of wanting to resist the feeling. It is resistance that keeps the feeling going. When you give up resisting or trying to modify the feeling, it will shift to the next feeling and be accompanied by a lighter sensation. A feeling that is not resisted will disappear as the energy behind it dissipates. It's the resistance, right? It's the resistance to feeling the feeling. And I'm sure there are millions of men out there, women probably as well, but I can just speak from my own perspective and the general stereotype, right? That men tend to bottle up their feelings or suppress them or repress them. Or, when you finally blow up, you maybe express those feelings at the wrong target, the wrong person, the wrong situation, whatever it may be. And so it's learning to drop the resistance ultimately, right? Like you have to realize that the thoughts that are generated by the feeling are just that, right? They're an epiphenomenon of the feeling itself, right? They're not the truth. And if you just stay stuck in that thought layer, then you're really just participating in your own resistance to feeling the feeling, which prevents you from processing the feeling, which prevents you from surrendering and letting go of the feeling and moving on with your life. And so, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, this is the practice, right? This is the art. This is the daily devotion, right? That you're daily, moment to moment even, devoting yourself to acknowledging your feelings for what they are before they metastasize into some toxic thought pattern, or even worse, like a toxic identity, self-limiting belief. There's a lot of different directions it can go once it becomes a thought pattern. And just nipping it in the bud, so to speak, right? You're catching it where it is, right? It's a feeling that you had, and resisting feeling that feeling is not going to serve you. It's only going to bottle it up and store it in the body and start creating a pathological process basically within you, not just biologically, but even mentally, even spiritually. So to free yourself of this and to actually experience radical liberation, you really have to commit to this process of just feeling whatever it is, and not want, as the author says, don't want it to be another way. Don't want to modify it, right? This includes terrible feelings, right? You may have gone through the loss of a loved one, or you may have some terminal disease, like whatever the feeling is, the anxiety, the dread, just feel it. Just feel it. I'm going to read another excerpt from Letting Go on chapter 2. Author writes, quote, "When letting go, ignore all thoughts. Focus on the feeling itself, not on the thoughts. Thoughts are endless and self-reinforcing, and they only breed more thoughts. Thoughts are merely rationalizations of the mind to try and explain the presence of the feeling. The real reason for the feeling is the accumulated pressure behind the feeling that is forcing it to come up in the moment. The thoughts or external events are only an excuse made up by the mind. As we become more familiar with letting go, it will be noticed that all our negative feelings are associated with our basic fear related to survival, and that all feelings are merely survival programs that the mind believes are necessary. The letting go technique undoes the programs progressively. Through that process, the underlying motive behind the feelings becomes more and more apparent. To be surrendered means to have no strong emotion about a thing. It's okay if it happens, and it's okay if it doesn't. When we are free, there's a letting go of attachments. We can enjoy a thing, but we don't need it for our happiness. There is progressive diminishing of dependence on anything or anyone outside of ourselves. These principles are in accordance. I want to say that again. These principles are in accord with the basic teaching of the Buddha to avoid attachment to worldly phenomena, as well as the basic teaching of Jesus Christ to be in the world, but not of it. Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier said than done, which is, I guess, why you have to make an entire lifetime out of the repetitions of this process, right? Of just continually letting go of whatever attachment or expectation you had in mind, right? As ultimately, that's what it was. It was a product of the mind. It's something that you wanted that you didn't get, or something that you didn't want that you did get. And that's going to create certain types of feelings, right? As we are evolutionarily hardwired to have, right? As the author says, these are survival programs. These are not things that we can even get our head around, so to speak. Although we do our best, right? We do our best to try and make these processes visible to our own cognition so that we can then change the way we act towards them, and to not dwell on them, to learn what they are, and to act in a way that treats them properly. And so, it's easier said than done, right? Like, It's okay if you live to see tomorrow, and it's okay if you don't. Right? It's been said that the way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death. And I think that's what this all comes down to. It's just we're filled with these survival programs because we are a product of survival, right? We are each our ancestors' descendants, and we made it. And that came at a price, a very heavy price, right? We have all of this resistance to the uncertainty of reality. And that's okay in a way, right? That's useful, right? It helps us survive and helps us function. But if we get stuck in the resistance, then we paradoxically impede our own progress. And that's the point. That's the point of awareness we need to come to. And it reminds me of something my therapist told me that, two of the most powerful letters in the English language are okay. Right? No matter what happens. Bad day, okay. Good day, okay. And so just learning and training yourself to be okay with any eventuality, that is the key to this teaching.